Okay, the new Bilstein shocks are here for the front of the car. Can't wait to get started on this. This should get rid of the bounces and squeaks, and I'm hoping I've got some vibration in the steering wheel that I'm really wanting to get rid of. If this doesn't do it, probably be looking at some sway bar linkage or control arms or something, but. All right, I've already got the front of the car up on some jack stands. I've got the tire off the car, and now I'm gonna take off the brake caliper. Okay, next you have the sway bar linkage right here. So we're gonna go with 18 on the nut and 17 on the by this little ball joint here that you have to hold. Yeah, there's the nut off of that. I'm gonna leave that attached right now. Okay, I'm not gonna lift on it. I just wanna get something under there to keep it from dropping at this point. Okay, so we're doing the driver's side. So over here under the front hood, I've taken off the plastic cover next to the battery. These three nuts here, they take a 13 millimeter of them. The holes, you can see it pretty good right here, that they're going through are slotted. And by loosening these three nuts and moving them over or back, you then adjust the camber of the tire. The top of the tire will tilt in or tilt out. And I want to put this back exactly where it was. So I've taken a Sharpie and marked it. So the last thing we have to loosen up is behind the brakes, at the bottom of the shock. You have this control arm here. Your ball joint is right in here. At the back of this arm, right here, where it's connected to the frame, there's a bolt running through it. One side, I believe, is 18 millimeters. The other side is 16 millimeters. I'm gonna have to get under the car to get to that. But once I'm not gonna take the bolt out. I just wanna loosen the nuts, and that will allow all of this to drop down. And at that point, I should be able to, especially with the old shock here, be able to pull down on it enough to clear the painted fender part here. I'm not really sure. All right, so that's pretty loose. Let's go out and give it a try. Okay, so now we're gonna take this, try to get this sway bar, the top bolts and the sway bar linkage out. Hammer. Okay, there we go. Let's try to drop this thing down. Yeah. Oh, I have one more thing. There's a rubber, this ABS line has a clip in the back. I don't know, now that I've taken the light out, you probably can't see it. Let me get my cell phone in there. Right here is where it was clipped in, this rubber piece. And I just realized there's one more little plastic clip right here I'm gonna pry off too with a flathead screwdriver. Okay, so the little plastic clip here, it was on for the pad sensors, is very, very old plastic, and I actually as gently as I could, tried to pry it off and broke the little piece here. It's just not broken off completely. But I should be able to take a zip tie and run through this part and through the hole in the back here and hold that on just as well when I get done. Compress down quite a bit to try to get under these painted parts. Turn it. Oh yeah. Very good. Now at this point, it's honestly just sitting in this piece. Pulls straight out, and there you have it. Now let's go to the bench and try to compress this spring and work this nut off. Okay, so I don't own a spring compressor, and it's too late for me to run to the auto parts store to borrow one. So what I've done is taken a couple of ratchet straps. Actually, I have two. I've got this thing pretty darn tight. So I'm not really sure how much compression this particular spring is under, but any of these that I have ever fooled with in the past, you need to somehow compress and hold this spring in place. Now, we have to get this nut off, and you have to hold this nut. Mine has an Allen wrench end on the tube, which is a 7mm, and then there's a 13/16 nut on the top. So yes, this is going to have to be wound off by hand. I can't use an impact or anything because I have to have the Allen wrench on there. And to hold the Allen wrench, because this is the only kind of Allen wrench that I have, I'm gonna have to use a piece of pipe and slide up over the end. Try to hold the end of the pipe now with my foot and see if I can loosen this nut. So I'm gonna spray a little PB Blaster around on this. I will tell you, I did the passenger side earlier and I didn't have any problems really. The nut's tight, but I didn't have any problems getting it off like I did without. All right, so I've let the blaster soak in for about a minute or so, and there we go. Yeah, I hope that Allen wrench is in there good, because that took a tremendous amount of pressure. There we go. So pay attention as you start taking these parts off. So we had the nut. We've got this cone-shaped washer that is concave, or I guess pointing down, or it's like a pool going up. You have this triangular part which has a rubber piece that the spring sets in. You can see where the end of the spring started here. You have your bearing here, and all these things are very dirty. You can buy replacements of all this stuff, but it's pretty pricey for what it is. So I figured I would wait and make sure and that I needed them before I ordered them. And so everything looks like it's in pretty good condition, but I am gonna go around all the rubber and plastic parts. I'm gonna use some Armor All. This is a grease-free formula that won't attract dirt, it says, just to try to lubricate the rubber and the plastic, soften it back up so it doesn't crack or break. Anyway, actually I want to set all this upside down. This was on here. I want to leave it the way it was. So next I have another cone washer. This one is kind of pointing up, or I don't know if you can see that well, going this way. So it's sort of convex, I guess you would say. You have the spring and the boot. Now the new strut The only thing it comes with is this washer right here, so I'm not worried about it. But I'm going to guess this is just like the passenger side. I want to show you how effective a 21-year-old shock or strut is. I should not be able to move this. Yep, just like the other side. So basically, I was just riding on the springs. Because I didn't get a new bearing or anything, open that up. Here's your bearings. I want to actually clean this cover and maybe just run a little bit of lithium grease around in here. A lot of gunk right around this edge here. Okay, I'm not going to touch the bearings, but this metal track goes on top of the bearings. And so what I'm going to do is just run a little bit of fresh grease right around there. All right. Very good. I'm going to do just a little bit of armor roll. And if I can kind of help out on the back, there's also a part there. And this part, the spring that sits on the top of the spring and this boot, I'm actually going to take them outside because I'm just going to spray them down really, really good because they're so nasty. All right, took them outside and sprayed them heavily with the Armor All, let it soak for just a second, and then wiped them. Sprayed the inside of the boot as well. Still pretty dirty in there, but I can't only do so much. Okay, so here's the new Bilstein, and unlike the old one, I can just barely move that as hard as I can push. Remember the old one, I was pushing it in with just one finger. So I can move that about 1/4 inch is all. So we want to put our rubber boot on first at the top of the strut. Make sure it is on, and it has a concave side that will sit down right over this lip right here. So it's very flat on top. On top of that washer, we'll go this guy. He's gonna kind of look like a little umbrella. Spring, base of the end of the spring in the step down. The top of the spring and this rubber piece has its own little groove that it is made there, or was made there for it. All right. Okay, so you're gonna have your top washer flipped this way so it's cupping on top, and then your nut. And I'm gonna have to go get my wife to help me because I'm gonna have to press down on this while she starts the nut for me. All right, thank you, Miss Joy. Okay, so we just barely got the nut started. So what I'm gonna do now, put my 7mm Allen in there with the pipe on the end. And then I'm gonna start cranking down on this nut. Maybe a couple more turns. Yep. Wow. So you will know it when it bottoms out. That's it. And at this point, I should be able to release that spring. All right, so there you have it. Anyway, we're gonna take our new strut assembly here and line up the fin on the back of it to go down through the slot there, just like that. And now I'm gonna have to set the light down. It should stay rolled over. And here's the scary part, getting under the painted pieces here. Oh wow, that went actually really well just then. Really, really well. The top of this assembly will turn a little, so you can line it up. There we go. Now, there we go. Good, good, good. That was much easier than the passenger side. I'm going to go ahead and pin tighten the nut. There we go. And now I'm going to go up top and do those 3 13mm nuts. All right, we have our nuts over here. I'm not going to tighten them just yet, just going to get them down close. So what I need to do is reach back in the wheel well and grab the shock and pull it. Get some light here. So you can see the black mark. There is my mark. And actually, by pulling it the way I did just now, I think it's all the way up. It might could slide down just a hair, but not much. It'll be back where it originally was. All right. Yeah, it's close, very close. I'm gonna take the car and get an alignment. Obviously, you don't mess with the suspension usually without having to do an alignment. I'm gonna start reassembling. I should not need the jack anymore at this point. So I guess the first thing I need to do is try to tighten this guy down. 17 and 18 on the nut. All right, good and tight. Now, the 10mm bolt and this whole contraption here that goes with the, where does it go? I don't want to get this real tight. It's just holding that piece on. I don't want the bolt to break off. I don't want to damage anything in there. On the back side, I've got this rubber piece, and it's going to go right inside of here, hopefully. Nothing will break. So there's a hole right here on this fin that's part of the shock. And that's what this plastic piece is supposed to clip into, but I broke it. So I am going to put a zip tie on it as soon as I can figure out exactly. Oh, let's see, this is all wrapped. I'm on the opposite side now. So it's supposed to go just like that. Now right here is where I put my zip tie. Okay, so next I need to get under the car and tighten the big bolt at the end of the control arm up here. Okay, so actually I've just discovered that maybe I don't need to get under the car. I think I can reach it from here, although I'm probably gonna have black all over my chin. I might need to pick up on this. There's a little bit of compression and then upward. And then my 16 and 18 millimeter wrenches. Yeah, it's not bad at all. Here we go. Okay, so I received my new bump stops and I'm going to install them now. I've taken the shocks back off the front of the car, and the bump stops go just like this. This outer ring here on the widest part is going to go into the top of the rubber boot, and then it's got a beveled end on it that the washer that's on the shock is going to sit down in. So take the washer off and then slide the boot down. The rubber stop is going to be very tight. We'll push it down and then reinstall the washer with the beveled part going down, and it'll slide over. It'll all be very snug. It'll sit right in there, and that is that. Now I'll get them back on the car. Okay, so these two bolts you're going to loosen here. This one and the one back there, they set the toe and the camber. So what you want to do is, you can tell this flared end on them has dash lines. So I found the center one and I put a dot on it, and I tried to put a dot on the frame part of the car there, but it didn't turn out right. So I used a Sharpie and made a black line over the top of the white paint to point at it, because you're going to want to get these back as close as possible to where they're currently setting. Because you're going to want to drive the car to get an alignment done when you're finished, and if the wheels are fighting each other or whatever, it's not going to be any fun at all. So and there's a possibility that you put it back exactly right and won't even need an alignment, but you more than likely will. So anyway, these are actually fairly easy to get to. We just came right off the back of the car here. The car is up on jack stands, and I was able to get to the two of them right there. All right, so this is the driver's side rear. I have the wheel removed, obviously. You're gonna need a 10 millimeter socket for this nut here that's in the middle of the screen that's holding the bracket for the brake lines. And on the other side, there's a 10 millimeter nut holding the plug for the ABS and brake pad sensors. And then behind that support rod here has a bolt going through, and is actually the clamp holding the bottom of the strut itself. And so on this side you have an 18 millimeter, you'll need an 18 millimeter socket to remove that nut, a 17 millimeter wrench onto this nut to keep this bolt from spinning while you're backing off the nut that's on this side. Okay, and then following this control arm back, and this is the first bolt that you marked there. It's 19 millimeter socket on this side, and on the other side the nut is 18 millimeter. And then the second one that you marked is there, kind of hard to see with the camera, but it's also 19 millimeter on this side, and the corresponding nut on the other side is 18 millimeter. And you will need to remove both of those. And then back out here in the front, the large nut in the center of the wheel, I'm not really sure what it is in metric, but I used an 1.25 inch socket. But once you have all that removed, you should be able to drop this down a little bit and start trying to work the shock out. Okay, so as far as the top of the strut, I have the roof in service position. I have the trunk opened because in here, if I can get a video, that big nut and everything, that's the top of the strut support, the upper strut support. And so what you have to do, this large, I've already loosened it, this very large flathead button, plastic button screw, and there's a second one down here, both of them on the drip pan. You're gonna have to remove those carefully. Don't job a hole in your drip pan foam. Goodness. Okay. So once you have those removed, you'll be able to peel this back a little bit. And there's one of the nuts there. There should be another one. Yeah, right there up in the front. And then this rubber plug, this is why we have the trunk open. So underneath the back edge of the trunk lid is this black rubber plug. You'll remove it. And then down in that hole is the third nut. So you'll have to use an extension to get to that. And you can remove two of them and just loosen another one about a turn or two, just so you have a little bit of play in the shock, but you don't want it to drop down. Once you have this bolt out of this plug, you should be able to come up here and slide. Can't. Yeah, I can. There we go. Yeah, so just like that. That's all. They're just held in there with pressure. So take out both of those, and then down here underneath, you're gonna have, oh, that one's already popped out. Okay, well, we don't have to worry about it, but there should be another one in that hole right there underneath. All right, well, I apologize for not filming the process of taking this apart. I did take all the bolts out that I showed you in the beginning, but I will say that the control arm back here that came out from here, I don't know what its problem was, but it did not want to come out. There was a lot of spraying of lubricant and prying with a claw hammer and tapping it, and finally got it out. But as you can see, got the drive shaft pushed out. It's back here. You want to kind of make sure it doesn't sag too much. I have heard that it could kind of come apart on the inside in here and cause trouble, but the other arm here that goes up into that slot came out fairly easily. And then took out the remaining nut and dropped the old strut out. I did go ahead and put one spring clamp on it, just thinking it would take some of the pressure off, but I am going to replace this upper mount section. I don't know if it's absolutely necessary, but I get a lot of hard when I go over speed bumps and stuff, jolt and kind of noisy, and it may be something as simple as replacing this rubber piece on the edge. I may not have needed to replace the whole thing, but they were about $22 a piece, something like that. And this rotten bump stop, I have brand new of those as well to use. Back and the front, let it penetrate. Give it about a minute or so before I even attempt to turn it. All right, so I've got the nut off the top. But up on the top, you've got a cone washer that points down. Then you have the upper strut mount that I'm replacing. The rubber piece is already coming off of this one. You have another cone washer here. Hard to do this with one hand. This cone washer is pointing up. I'm just going to lay them here just to remember. And this almost looks like a toilet ring, but anyway, rubber gasket and a plastic piece separate pretty easily. The spring itself, and I added another hose clamp to that just for safety. and then the plastic and the rubber stop. And like I said, I'm going to use some cleaner and clean that black plastic up, pull all this red rotten plastic out and replace it with a fresh new yellow bump stop I have here. Okay, so I've cleaned this piece up here with a grease-free Armor All cleaner, and then the new bump stop. What I did last time was just kind of worked it, turned it, twisted it, because you want to get this ring inside this part here. Too far. There we go. And that's the way that should look. And also the new bump stop is going to be very tight when it slides down over this, but that's the way it's supposed to be. All right, so I inserted the cone washer pointing up. This rubber and plastic piece, I did clean them with the same Armor All stuff. Just real quick note though about this new upper strut brace. The old one had a rubber gasket that like went on the edge of it. This new one has, I don't know what you would call it, just a rubber, I guess it's also a gasket, but it's glued onto the top of it. It doesn't wrap around the edge. And also, these three studs are not equal distances apart. If you can tell across the top, it's much wider than from here to here. From here to here is the same as from there to this side over here, but across the top is quite a bit different. And you actually then, on this plastic piece, you have the same sort of configuration. So they have the little indentions for the bottoms of the studs. So you'll want to line that up. Okay, so here's the new one ready for installation. And what I was trying to point out was this fin here that attaches to the wheel carrier. If you made a straight line as you could, try to line it up with this stud, which is the odd stud. Like here's the larger space at the bottom. And so this is the guy kind of in the middle or on top. And if you do that, everything should be, get it as close as you can, and everything should be lined up and go in very easily. Once again, the bottom of the spring is sitting down in the little notch that it goes in, and the top of the spring is seated onto this rubber piece. And also, the bottom of the studs, each one is in their little notch on the plastic. And that's it. Let's see about getting it up in there. First thing I'm going to do is put the new strut assembly up inside and try to get a couple of nuts started on the studs here. Okay, I'm not sure I gave you guys good information earlier, but these three nuts on top of the struts is 13 millimeter. I might have said 10, but 13. And I've already got the first two that I could reach in here started. I'm not attempting to tighten them, I just want to get them started. The one that's down in the hole here, I've got the nut on the socket and the socket on an extension, and I use just a tiny little piece of tape to hold it there until I can get it started, just so I don't drop it down in there. I do have a magnet ready just in case I have to try to fish it out, but it, you know, might end up in that Never Never land if I'm not careful. Okay, so the strut is mounted up there. I've got all three screws barely started. I have it slid into the wheel assembly housing, and I'm trying to get the control arm and this arm back into their places. Got the thing up on a jack. I'm trying to ease up and push back. I've got the drive shaft starting to come back through. Just push, jack, push, twist, you know, keep guiding things. Make sure that this support rod, whatever that is up and out of the way and ready to go back where it needs to be and not stuck up under something. But yeah, it's coming along. All right, so with the new shocks installed, the ride is a little nicer. I've eliminated the shake in the steering wheel. I think the problem was the original shocks were completely gone, so I was just riding on springs. So if one tire hit something, it sent a shock wave to the other tire, which sent a shock wave back, and it just shook the steering wheel. That's gone. I think I've gained about a ½ an inch in ride height. The stance looks a little nicer front and back. I'm not scrubbing over speed bumps and things like I was doing before. I do still have a little bit of creaking and popping going on, especially in the morning when the car is cold. You drive off the end of the driveway or over a speed bump. So I think in the future I'm going to be changing the sway bar linkage all the way around, and also maybe the sway arm bushings, and see if that clears that up. But anyway, I hope this video helped you, and good luck with your project.